First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the land of the Gumatj people as part of the Yunal Nation, and I'd like to acknowledge and thank them for their generous hospitality over this Garma process. Thanks very much for that, Noel, and the government is playing the role in this circumstance that it should. We are following the mob, and that is the appropriate role. And we spent many years trying to work out where that role really should be. Like all relationships, some of these things take time. But as Noel mentioned, he said some things certainly take much longer than you think. I'll just read from a parliamentarian who made a speech. He says, still amazes us that in the Territory you can drive or steam for days in a vessel through myriads of the most magnificent islands for countless hours across the country, so rich not only in a cultural sense but in an economic sense, with the potential for industries such as tourism, aquaculture and forestry. And yet when you arrive at the home of those proud owners of this vast, rich tracts of land, you're not greeted, as you may expect, by a community whose housing, whose health, economic well-being reflect the riches of their land. Instead, dwellings sometimes consist of a few sheets of tin, and the overall community demonstrates the lowest standards of mainstream education, the lowest standards of health, and the average expectancy for men, which is less than half my current age. Well, I think I'm 17 years older. Quite a bit of time. But as Noel describes it, very little difference, that notion of land rich, dirt poor. So from the perspective of an outsider, it always looks more challenging. It's a bit like standing in front of a plantation forest. You can stand here and have a perspective here, and the trees are straight and organised and you can see it. One step over here, the context is entirely different. It's just jungle. You can't see any structure. And so that's why it's so important to have people who own the land, people who own the culture, the people, the community themselves, to drive the change. And that change principally must be about empowerment, about their own governance, as far as they wish to take that. And in the 17 years I've been in Parliament, this is the most exciting process that I've been engaged with. And I think Noel overcooks it a bit by saying that, look, the Minister suggested to us it should be about this and that. Let me tell you, that was their complete agenda. I nodded and he's very kindly sort of indicated it was part of my idea, but it wasn't. This is something that's been driven by people. This is not a statement given by Garma by Noel. This is a function of days and days and hundreds of people collecting together from across the whole of the Cape of Queensland, from different places, with old grievances, tribal differences, different languages. But they came together with the knowledge that if they were able to move past those things, it would be a greater future for their people. Leadership. Just leadership. And out of those meetings, there was some agreement, there was some disagreement. So they met again to talk about where they may go in those areas that we disagree. So as you can imagine, the iterations of meetings and in the context of Garma truth-telling, they were there being fair income. This is a fair income business. That's why they've arrived, the Palmer mob have arrived with Palmer futures. So if I can just paint a bit of a picture that I can see, that people have talked to me about, what this place will look like in the future. Prescribed body corporates, those people responsible for native title. 12 sub-regions, all talking together about what they are not doing as individuals, which they have the right to do, of course, but what they can also do collectively. They would seek, of course, to say, well, Nigel, we'd like to be the CDB provider, we'd like to be the job active provider in all of those communities, because our enterprises, we wish to move people from the bullshit work for the dole scheme to a real job. I hear. That's what they tell me. This will make that possible if that's what they wish to do. This isn't an imposition. In health, Imagine the collective efficiencies of a network of Aboriginal controlled health organisations. Imagine the PHN, the Public Health Network, that doesn't have a countryman stuck on there to make us feel good. It's all countrymen. There's a PHN for the Cape. They would be making decisions about their allocations, about where they knew the priorities were, because they're standing in line with the trees, where we are not. Noel talks about tribal wealth, all of this land. For a long time, both through the states, vicariously and directly, the Commonwealth over many, many years has put funds forward for the benefit of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in terms of housing, both remote and metropolitan. Now, the beneficial ownership of those lies with the states. If you talk about tribal wealth, imagine a Palmer entity that they control the beneficial ownership of every house that has been allocated by the Commonwealth to Indigenous people. Now, the only one's going to get the shits with that, it's going to be the State Treasurer, and that's just this whole surplus thing. It doesn't matter. But those leases are completely fungible. So rightly, Aboriginal people say, look, I don't really want to go into debt because the only thing I have to mortgage is my land, and that's me. It's not something I can sell or move away, because that's not what my culture is. Suddenly, the complete fungibility of all those houses and blocks across Queensland, across the Cape particularly, I'm able to mortgage against those because there's a house on them. Whatever's happening to the house, that's okay, but I own the underlying mortgage on that land. So a housing entity that builds, that maintains, that has the beneficial ownership, that's something that goes towards tribal wealth. That's something that governments can work towards. Can you imagine every road that was built through the Cape, and those who, you probably wouldn't have heard of the Peninsula Development Road, but let me tell you, that was a picture of misery. That was a picture of how not to do it. That was a picture of how to exclude Aboriginal people from even the provision of water and gravel, almost by deliberation. No, it wasn't mischief, it was just complete incompetence. But Palmer Futures will put an end to that incompetence. People can know that the future is we need so much gravel, we need so much water for the roads. We can facilitate all of those things. But the deal is any roads you build in the Cape are going to be built by the locals in the Cape. They're going to be built by businesses, Aboriginal businesses in the Cape. And government's role, of course, is when you have a quarry, we're not expecting anyone to bash rocks with hammers anymore. We have machinery to do that, and screening plants, and we can assist with some of those things. Imagine beef production. Across the Cape, some of the finest beef production country anywhere you like. Having a centralised marketing and fattening facility. The opportunities and the synergies of scale. Imagine having the ranges. There's 12 separate areas, lots of ranger groups who have in and of themselves a great deal of pride about where I come from. But if they chose to, they would be Palmer Rangers. And over their land and country, already we've had some discussions about their capacity to enforce laws of their own. And those laws would have come, of course, from a devolution under the Local Government Act in Queensland to local councils. So in that area, the opportunity for all the local councils to still be local councils, vast majority are Aboriginal councils, and those councils are actually able to make bylaws about trespass, about everything, about alcohol, about speed limits, roads. For the first time, would be able to make laws for themselves and for others. And let me tell you, the notion of trespass is a really difficult one with such vast lands, which access happens because the current enforcement and control processes are not part of that process. So Palmer Rangers would control the largest and arguably the greatest slice of biodiversity in the world. We're working now with Palmer Futures about a walk. You'll be able to walk all the way up the east coast to the most beautiful biodiversity, right up to the Cape, with eco-lodges along the way that employ local people, and the benefits for those go to local people and a local economy. So the government, and our role, is to usually get out of the way, and which we'll try to, but we should be there to facilitate the meetings, to ensure that quite large sums of money all governments seem to throw at matters actually are thrown via processes like Palmer Futures. So I will not be investing anywhere in Palmer Futures without their direction. They will direct me, not advise me. They will say, we don't think this is the right service, or we don't think this is the right provider, or these are the changes we want in the service and this is the change in the provider, and we will be driven by that. Now, that's as close as I've ever seen about real empowerment. That's the closest I've ever read about people being in charge of their own future. But this is a model that is not only for the Cape. This is a model anywhere in Australia. And an open invitation to every Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander group across Australia whom I meet with regularly, please come and talk to me about the framework you might like. There are elements of this you might like, there are elements of other things you might like, and of course we contextualise completely different from La Perouse to Palmer. But the issues are the same, and the process of empowerment has to be the same. So can I congratulate the Palmer mob, Palmer Future. Watch this space. This is the most exciting thing that's going on at the moment, so congratulations, Noel.